Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about deadlines. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why is it that product managers underestimate the importance of efficient and well-written code and pressure their engineers to meet deadlines with bad code? Are managers the enemy of quality and the cause of outages? No, they are not. They are simply in an endless state of, well, basically, they are victims of an industry that is sadly not as quite a lot of other industries. Let me explain it a little bit. So, I will argue to you that if we take an example as agile and lean processes and this continuous feedback and not giving estimate and stuff like that, that is an idea that we came up with in order to facilitate a better relationship and expectations between the people providing a service or building something and the people who are on the receiving end. The reason why we did that is because we found that in software development, as in many industries where things are not as predictable as in other industries, well, if we give estimates or we give promises about deadlines and things like that, when there are so many unknowns factors that can determine whether or not we're going to meet those expectations, we end up with a lot of issues over and over and over. Because every single time you say, oh, we're going to be done by that time and that time, you're going to be wrong in quite a lot of cases. But the problem is that when you communicate with people who don't really understand these processes and stuff like that, they go and get expectations that, well, that's the core of why people feel that it is hard and a little bit scary to give estimates. Because I will go as far as to argue that the world is not, it doesn't want lean, it wants waterfall. It wants the same thing as, when I go and I order a pizza. They will tell me it takes 20 minutes or 15 minutes or something like that. And when I arrive, I expect it to be there. I don't expect it to be like 2 hours later or something like that. I expect it to be there. But the thing about these sorts of processes is that it's very easy to determine roughly how long it's going to take to make a pizza or a meal or build something, or if you're going to ship a certain amount of units from some factory in an assembly line or things like that. These are things that are easier to deterministically say we're going to be done by that time. The problem with our industry is that that is not possible. The reason being because every single time you're going to sit down and you're going to talk about these complicated systems and so forth, it's much more akin to something that a researcher would do, or an inventor or something like that, or an engineer building something and so forth. It's a lot trickier. It's not a cookie cutter process usually. There's a lot of creativity and personal things that can be relevant for individual software developers, individual teams, and alignments and coordination and specification discovery and scope creeps and all of these sort of things that happen during the delivery of the whatever we're going to build, right? And there are many industries that have this problem, which is of course why things take longer and why things like construction and stuff like that might have issues that are unforeseen. And so the engineering managers are not asking you usually to write bad code out of just it's not like it's not like they're trying to make you do bad work. It is that when you have expectations to deliver and your customers are unhappy over the fact that you're not delivering, that pressure is enormous. And so their usual priority is going to be make the customer happy. How do we do that? Well, as I like to say, there's only two ways of solving it. Either you simplify the problem or you increase the capacity. Like, you can work faster or you can work on less, ship less stuff. These are the two factors, unless you're going to fire everybody and find faster people who work faster. And so what they will do is a very human thing, I would argue. It's exactly the same thing I would do if, well, under different circumstances, I do a very similar thing. If I have an ache in my body, or if I get, I do that mistake and I go on WebMD or something like that and look up some very attractive new disease that I think that I have. All of a sudden I'm going to call my doctor. Am I sure? Are you really, really sure that you tested everything? Did you really take all the blood samples you needed? And like, I get to be a hypochondriac and I start checking and double checking and triple checking that they didn't forget anything, that there's nothing else we can be doing in order to make sure that I'm not dying from something terrible, right? They're doing exactly the same thing. Their pressure comes from their stakeholders, and their stakeholders have, of course, like, they want to see when things are done. They just want that answer. When are you done? And so the longer it takes, and even if you and me who are sitting there with the code at our fingertips and we know why things are taking longer and we have all this knowledge and we understand that this is how it works and so forth, not everybody has that understanding and that insight. And so your manager is going to start asking you, are you really sure? Are you really sure? Like, this is the behavior you are going to see usually, unless you have someone who is extremely emotionally resilient or has a very strong position within the conversation with the customers or the stakeholders or so forth and so forth. And so what will happen is that if push comes to shove, they will get to a point where basically it becomes a little bit, I'm not saying desperation, because there is a gap here that I see with software developers all the time, and that is that they will try to find anything that can be done in order to ship faster. But what happens is that we software developers, or a lot of us at the very least, we interpret what they're asking for as let's just do really shitty work so that we can get done faster. And the software, like the manager, they will say that they want that. And because in their mind, what's important is that they get something out the door so the customer is happy, right? But at the same time, you have to understand that the expectation is that it will work. And that is where the gap is, because the software developers think that, all right, so we will skip all the things that quote unquote are supposed to be necessary in order, like testing, for example. Like, we will ship as fast as possible and just hope that it works. That is the thing that's the gap. That's the thing that I argue is the problem. It's not that the manager wants you to ship something that you're not 100% confident is going to work, or like that feels really risky. They just want to make sure that you're cutting it ever so finely, that you're not taking unnecessary amounts of time and putting that on stuff that isn't relevant. I like to make my favorite example of this is the medical industry, like the pharmaceutical companies. So if you've said to all the pharma companies, it's okay for you to not do all the quality checks and all the stuff that you have to make sure to do in order to make sure that the medicine is going to kill a bunch of people, they could ship really, really quickly. They could ship medicine like that in comparison to what they're doing now, because they wouldn't have to make sure that nobody dies from their medicine. And the same thing is happening to you. It's just that you don't have a law that is going to put you in jail basically if you do the thing. Like, if you start skipping unit tests as an example, when it's really, really important that you do add some unit tests for a specific feature, you have to do some checks or stuff like that. Your interpretation is, okay, let's skip all of that because it's important that we get done quicker. And that's why I argue that we need laws, because the pharma companies are like, they have stockholders and things like that, or shareholders and things like that. They might have done the same thing if they didn't have that restriction. We have to self-impose that restriction on ourselves, because I can promise you there is no customer anywhere who will say, yes, it's fine for you to get done early because we don't care that it doesn't work. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, managers are not the enemy of quality. They're just victim of expectations. And that is always going to be the case for every single industry wherever you go. It's the exact same thing that happens to any customer every single time I go to any company. Like, I go and buy food in a restaurant or anything like that. I am a customer and I have expectations on service. I have expectation on A, B, and C. Like, a classic one is like everybody wants every clerk who stands in a shop to be the nicest person around. And if they're a little bit moody or whatever, we don't necessarily all care why. We just think that they're being a bad person or like misbehaving in some way. They might have had the most horrible day ever, but that's not really our priority at that time, because we're thinking about ourselves. Customers are thinking the same sort of way, and your manager is just an extension of that need to ship and to deliver value and deliver on expectations. So when they're asking you to write quote unquote bad code, it's not that they want you to do things that will compromise that the system is working. That's what you are doing because you are feeling stressed over the fact that they are feeling stressed over the fact that their customers are waiting for things. And that thing, you have to build up the emotional resistance to deal with that situation, at least until we get laws that will basically put you in jail if you don't write unit tests, for example. Have a great day.